You guys, you know how the American right, American conservatives in particular, have made so-called free speech one of their signature causes, along with so-called cancel culture. Now, I know many of you naughty, cynical so-and-sos might have thought this was all one big convenient ruse, and really all they really meant is powerful people should be able to say whatever gruesome and inflammatory things they wanted about minorities who lack a voice without getting any challenge or pushback. And if even a 17-year-old Twitter user with 204 followers responded to them with, "Hey, hold on a minute, isn't that a really nasty and untrue thing to say about this minority?" They could go, help me, my free speech is being silenced. The totalitarian left are out to get me. I'm melting. Maybe that's what you thought. I mean, I think you're deeply cynical. Look, I get it. Given since Israel's genocide began, many of these same people seem to shut up basically about free speech and cancel culture altogether, largely given they're the same people who have led the charge to cancel anyone who has such extreme and unacceptable opinions like slaughtering little children with bombs is bad, actually. You know, harassing them, leading hate mobs against them, deplatforming them, sacking them, getting them arrested. Well, look, as your unofficial free speech monitor, I thought I'd just log in and see how the valiant conservative free speech cause is going. Let's have a look, shall we? Sorry, just logging into my True Social account. I'm an addict, what can I say? Let's see what the big Daddy D has to say. Let me just read this from President Donald J. Trump. All federal funding will stop for any college, school, or university that allows illegal protests. Agitators will be imprisoned or permanently sent back to the country from which they came. American students will be permanently expelled or, depending on the crime, arrested. No masks. I'll level with you. I wouldn't say this is screaming free speech in the classical sense. The same day he tweeted this, or I don't know what the word is, True Socialed it, he said the following in his State of the Union address.
I've stopped all government censorship and brought back free speech in America. It's back.
Now, what's kind of funny there is that during this address, Congressman Al Green was removed from the chamber for heckling him over Medicaid.
Mr. Green, take your seat. Take your seat, sir. Take your seat. Finding that members continue to engage in willful and concerted disruption of proper decorum, the chair now directs the sergeant at arms to restore order. Remove this gentleman from the chamber.
Now, to help us unpick what Donald Trump meant on Truth Social, his choice for the US ambassador to the United Nations, Elise Stefanik, a delightful and charming individual, she's there on hand to help us, kind of pass through the words he's used. Now, important point, she's not Jewish. Something I know because she's previously denounced a Jewish studies professor who is actually Jewish for being known for his despicable anti-Semitic views because of his critiques of Israel. A despicable smear against this individual. This is, of course, highly relevant because it underlines how the very real evil of anti-Semitism is redefined to mean, say, opposing Israel's war crimes. So these people's understanding of anti-Semitism is that they can attack, as non-Jewish people, Jewish academics who specialize in Jewish studies for being anti-Semitic because they critique the crimes committed by the Israeli state. So you can see what they mean by banning what they call, anti-Semitism on campus. And we'll talk about this because they don't just say anti-Semitism, but when they talk about these demonstrations against Israel's genocide, they mean up to and including defaming Jewish academics who oppose these crimes. Now, what Elise Stefanik said is this: under President Donald Trump, colleges and universities will be held accountable. Anti-Semitism and anti-Israel hate will not be tolerated on American campuses. Promises made, promises kept. So she's very clearly conflating anti-Semitism with what is described here as anti-Israel hate. What does anti-Israel hate mean exactly, according to this individual? In practice, of course, we know what it means. It means opposing Israel's war crimes. It means opposing genocide. It means expressions of solidarity with Palestinians. It means supporting the right of the Palestinian people to national self-determination. How do you reconcile this, not just with their rhetoric on free speech, but with the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States of America, which guarantees free speech. What this points to, by the way, is how US democracy is being chipped away by Trump's authoritarian government. And as I'll explain, so-called centrists and liberals, or whatever you want to call them, have helped pave the way for this disaster. Now let's just see the hypocrisies in full glory, shall we? Researcher Will Stansel notes the past tweet of Will Chamberlain. Who's Will Chamberlain? He's the legal counsel to the Internet Accountability Project, which, according to its website, has a mission to lend a conservative voice to the calls for federal and state governments to rein in big tech before it's too late. Back in 2020, he tweeted the following: "Free speech is more than the First Amendment. It's a cultural commitment to the idea that everyone should have a right to participate in public discourse." Everyone, he says. That seems rather unambiguously clear to me. Now, Will Stansel, who is this researcher and activist, tweeted recently, "At some point the opposition needs to say what is happening here. Donald Trump is a tyrant in the full sense of the term, an American fascist dictator who believes the law flows directly from his command, and he is also an unwell, unfit and criminal man with nonsensical whims. Now, enter this conservative champion of free speech who believes everyone should be able to participate in this discourse, the national discourse. Will Chamberlain. This is what he really, as I said, everyone in public discourse, everyone should be able to participate. This is what he responded to that tweet. Your friends are going to jail. Not very free speechy, is it? Not everyone should have a right to participate in public discourse, is it? Not in the classical sense, unless words now have completely different meanings, i.e. opposite meanings. Now, before we discuss how absolutely ridiculous it is that Trump's own vice president has made free speech his big issue while Trump shuts down free speech, let's not forget the role of so-called centrists or liberals and many people who call themselves Democrats. Because it wasn't just conservatives who vilified protests in the US, on campus and elsewhere against Israel's genocide. No, it was these supposed moderates and centrists who joined in. This was part of a deliberate attempt to turn the world on its head, to portray those opposed to slaughtering innocent people, many of them children, to those opposed to war crimes as the real, dangerous, hateful extremists. And in doing so, the supposed committed opponents of Donald Trump helped pave the way for the authoritarian crackdown led by Trump today. They legitimized it. But let's turn to J.D. Vance, Donald Trump's vice president. The guy does an excellent impression of a sidekick to a schoolyard bully, sniggering at his abuse, trying to harass other people to get the bully's approval. Let's listen to what he said on Fox News this week.
We have to ask ourselves the questions as leaders. Are we willing to defend people even if we disagree with what they say? If you're not willing to do that, I don't think you're fit to lead Europe or the United States of America.
If you're running, just to quote that, are we willing to defend people even if we disagree with what they say? You what, JD? Dude, your boss just declared your administration is going to lock up people you disagree with in Israel. They're going to arrest them. They're going to deport them. They're going to expel them. So you're saying Trump, presumably, isn't fit to lead the United States of America? If we're taking your words literally, that's what you mean. And if so, we are in the same place, JD, which certainly comes as quite a surprise for me. Indeed, let's listen to JD Vance lecturing Europe. Yes, that's right, lecturing the entire continent in a speech at Munich last month.
And unfortunately, when I look at Europe today, it's sometimes not so clear what happened to some of the Cold War's winners. I look to Brussels, where EU commissars warn citizens that they intend to shut down social media during times of civil unrest the moment they spot what they've judged to be, quote, hateful content. Or to this very country, where police have carried out raids against citizens suspected of posting anti-feminist comments online as part of, quote, combating misogyny on the internet, a day of action. I look to Sweden, where 2 weeks ago the government convicted a Christian activist for participating in Koran burnings that resulted in his friend's murder. And as the judge in his case chillingly noted, Sweden's laws to supposedly protect free expression do not, in fact, grant, and I'm quoting, a free pass to do or say anything without risking offending the group that holds that belief. And perhaps most concerningly, I look to our very dear friends, the United Kingdom, where the backslide away from conscience rights has placed the basic liberties of religious Britons in particular in the crosshairs. A little over 2 years ago, the British government charged Adam Smith Connor, a 51-year-old physiotherapist and an Army veteran, with the heinous crime of standing 50 meters from an abortion clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes. Not obstructing anyone, not interacting with anyone, just silently praying on his own. And after British law enforcement spotted him and demanded to know what he was praying for, Adam replied simply, it was on behalf of the unborn son he and his former girlfriend had aborted years before. Now, the officers were not moved. Adam was found guilty of breaking the government's new buffer zones law, which criminalizes silent prayer and other actions that could influence a person's decision within 200 meters of an abortion facility. He was sentenced to pay thousands of pounds in legal costs to the prosecution. Now, I wish I could say that this was a fluke, a one-off crazy example of a badly written law being enacted against a single person. But no, this last October, just a few months ago, the Scottish government began distributing letters to citizens whose houses lay within so-called safe access zones, warning them that even private prayer within their own homes may amount to breaking the law. Naturally, the government urged readers to report any fellow citizens suspected guilty of thought crime. In Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat.
Well, on the case of Scotland, he notes there the safe access zones legislation, which came into force last year, preventing anti-choice protesters from gathering within 200 metres of an abortion clinic. That's to stop protesters from harassing women who are about to have a medical procedure with the express intent of causing them trauma, so they don't do it, or adding to trauma, many of those women very vulnerable. It is misinformation or disinformation, depending on whether he knew the facts, to say letters had been sent to people saying they couldn't pray in their own homes. That is a nonsense. Do I think protesters having the right to surround medical facilities in order to intimidate predominantly younger women who may be vulnerable before a medical procedure is a question of free speech? No, I do not. And it is certainly not comparable to students opposing the mass killing of innocent civilians facilitated by their own government. Indeed, I do think there are questions about free speech in Europe, not least in Germany, for example. There's been a deliberate crackdown on people speaking out about Palestine there. The full force of the law has been used against people for exercising free speech on Palestine, as well as careers being ruined, deplatforming, we could go on. Again, this is not something J.D. Vance is interested in. And I would imagine, given his president's latest decree, he supports Germany in doing just that. Indeed, when Keir Starmer recently visited the White House, J.D. Vance made this point.
I said what I said, which is that we do have, of course, a special relationship with our friends in the UK and also with some of our European allies. But we also know that there have been infringements on free speech that actually affect not just the British. Of course, what the British do in their own country is up to them, but also affect American technology companies and by extension, American citizens. So that is something that we'll talk about today at lunch.
Well, I'd imagine here he's referring to the violent far-right riots / attempted pogroms, which took place on English and Northern Irish streets last August, when there were various attempts to burn to death refugees in hotels, as well as mosques, where people of colour were violently targeted in the streets, where people's homes were attacked. And some people went to jail for inciting such violence online. As it happens, I wrote an entire column disputing whether prison was the right answer. I'm sceptical about prison as an answer to most problems. I mean, when I was beaten up by a neo-Nazi back last August, sorry, not last year, when I was beaten up by a neo-Nazi in 2019 and they were sentenced to prison for nearly 3 years, I opposed that, put it in my victim impact statement, because I don't see that as the answer. But, you know, questions of incitement during attempted pogroms are as being free speech, according to this administration. That's what we're talking about. You know, incitement becomes free speech. But it's not free speech for young people to protest against mass murder. So it's an attack on free speech if you've got literally basically a violent uprising on the streets, which is threatening to kill people, and people online are writing, egging all of that on. That's free speech. If you're a youngster who's opposed to the mass murder of innocent people, you could go to jail. I mean, what do you say? You see, this whole saga exposes this lie, this con, this sham. These people do not care about free speech. Not in the slightest. Sure, they want racists and fascists in Europe and elsewhere to be able to say what they want, no matter how inflammatory, no matter if it's incitement. But their own young people having the right to oppose mass murder, well, those people must be arrested, imprisoned, deported, expelled. The truth is, this far-right authoritarianism encapsulated by Trump is the real menace to democracy. And their talk about free speech is one big lie, and we must expose them. Please like and subscribe with your thoughts and your comments. Help us challenge the awful corporate mainstream media, which is obviously bankrolled by billionaires. We're not. All the work we do is made possible by you as we expand to new audiences across different platforms at patreon.com/OwenJones84. We've got lots of things lined up, particularly when I finish my book, which is called The Fall of the West. Only question is, when it's published, will the West have actually just fallen by then? It'll sort of be past tense. Also, if you are around London, tonight we are organising a big meeting to help stop the state visit by Donald Trump. I will include a link to that in the video description. So if you're around, it's 7 p.m. This is Thursday, 6th of March. If you listen to this video afterwards, it's too late, you can't come. But if you are around, do come and join us. There'll be a platform including Palestinians, Ukrainians, and other activists because we need to stop Donald Trump state visit. And if he comes, we need mass protests on the streets. So yes, 7 p.m. tonight. You have free tickets. I'll include the link in the bio. And speak to you in a bit.